I've been camping for years, and I used to think I understood winter. I grew up in Minnesota. I've seen my fair share of snow, cold, and whiteouts, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened in January of 2018. At the time I was 27 and working construction. Winter always meant layoffs, and that year I decided I wasn't going to sit at home and waste time. I had saved enough money and wanted to do something I had been putting off for years. Take a solo camping trip to the Rockies before the spring crowd hits. In hindsight, the idea was stupid. Not because camping was dangerous, I had done backpacking trips alone plenty of times, but because I underestimated the weather. I started my trip near Pike National Forest, planning to spend 4 nights out there. The forecast said cold, maybe some snow, but nothing risky, so I packed light. Light enough that I regret it every time that memory resurfaces. That day was easy. Blue sky, beautiful views, crisp air. I hiked nearly 10 miles and set up camp near a frozen creek. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. Maybe down to the teens, but nothing I couldn't handle. Day 2 was the turning point. Around noon, the wind picked up. I remember the exact moment it changed. The sky went from clear to hazy in under half an hour. I'd seen sudden shifts before, but this one felt different. Like the entire forest held its breath. I tried to check the weather, but I had little signal. The only thing I could load was a tiny alert banner. Winter storm warning, blizzard conditions possible. Possible, that word fooled me into staying. I should have turned around. I should have packed up and headed back down the trail. Instead, I kept hiking, thinking I set up camp closer to the marked path so I could get out early the next morning. By 4 p.m., the storm hit full force. Snow poured down so heavily I couldn't see 50 feet ahead. The wind cut through my jacket like needles. Trees were shaking violently. The trail disappeared beneath inches, then feet of fresh powder. By nightfall, I couldn't even see the sky. My tent was useless in that wind. If I had tried to pitch it, it would have either blown away or completely collapsed on me. I'm not sure when panic fully set in, but I remember the moment I realized one thing very clearly. I wasn't going to survive if I didn't find shelter. The only reason I found a cabin was luck, pure luck. I had been walking blindly, using my trekking pole to feel the ground ahead of me, my head tucked down so the wind wouldn't tear my face apart. My water bottle was completely frozen, my fingers were numb, and I literally couldn't feel my toes. Then I saw a shape, just a darker rectangle against the white blur. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But when the wind shifted for a moment, I saw it clearly. A cabin. Small, maybe 1 room, but it was there. Smoke wasn't coming out from the chimney, which worried me. But the roof looked intact. It had a door, 4 walls. I practically stumbled up the steps. The door wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully closed, just slightly cracked open. I should have realized that was odd. But when you're freezing to death in a blizzard, you don't think clearly. I pushed the door open.
Hello?
No answer. I stepped inside, wiped the snow out of my eyes, and shut the door behind me. The relief of being out of the wind was so overwhelming that I didn't immediately notice the smell. It was faint at first, like old sweat, damp wood, and something metallic. The cabin was dim, lit only by a faint gray light bleeding through the frosted window. There was a cot in the corner, a wood stove, and a table with a single chair. It looked lived in, but not recently. Snow had drifted inside near the door. The fire pit was cold, the cot was messy, like someone had thrown the blanket aside, but there was no footprints. Nothing that suggested someone had been there in the last day or 2. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe a hunter used it sometimes. Maybe someone took shelter here recently and left in a hurry. Maybe they'd come back soon. I didn't want to be in someone else's shelter without permission, but realistically, I didn't really have a choice. First thing I did was try to get the stove working. There was old firewood stacked near it, so I loaded it and let it mash. The warmth was weak, but better than nothing. I took off my gloves, my boots, sat near the stove, and tried to thaw my hands. I just remember thinking clearly, I'll leave as soon as the storm calms, just a few hours. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. The first time something was wrong happened maybe 20 minutes after I arrived. I heard a sound outside. At first it was subtle, like footsteps crunching lightly through the deep snow. I froze and listened harder. For a moment, the storm died down enough that I could clearly hear it. Someone or something was walking around outside the cabin. I held my breath and grabbed my trekking pole, the closest thing I had to a weapon. Hello? I called through the door again. No answer. The footsteps circled the cabin slowly. The storm muffled them, but I could hear their rhythm. Deliberate, steady, not a deer, not random. Someone was out there. When they reached the side of the cabin, where the small window was, I crept toward it. I wiped the frost on my sleeve. Nothing, only snow. The footsteps continued around the back of the cabin, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I waited, barely breathing. Minutes passed, maybe 10, 20, I don't know. I told myself it could have been an animal or even the wind playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I think I knew better. The second sign came when I tried to get comfortable. I moved the blanket on the cot and noticed something underneath, what looked like a torn piece of fabric. I picked it up. It was a part of a jacket sleeve, a winter jacket, torn at the seam. It looked fresh, not weathered or old. There was something else too, tiny dark flecks near the tear. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. It was blood. Not much, but enough. That was when the smell hit me again, stronger this time, and I realized what it reminded me of. Unwashed clothes, old sweat, metal, like someone who hadn't been bathed in months, someone who had been bleeding, someone who had been inside this cabin recently. I suddenly felt like an intruder, like I had stepped into someone's space, someone who might come back. I thought about leaving immediately, but when I opened the door crack, the wind nearly ripped it out of my hands. The blizzard was even worse than before. I wouldn't make it 10 feet. I shut the door and bolted it. That was when I heard it. A voice. Somewhere outside. Hey. It was distant, muffled by the storm, but unmistakably human. Hey, open up. The voice didn't sound like a hiker. It didn't sound panicked or desperate. It sounded really angry. Open the door. The man punched on the wood hard, so hard the latch rattled. I backed away from the door, gripping my trekking pole. This is my cabin. Open the door right now. His tone changed on the last words, sharper and more frantic. He slammed the door again. I stepped back until I hit the opposite wall. The pounding finally stopped. Complete silence. Then I heard the man say something. All right, have it your way. His footsteps moved away. I didn't relax, not even slightly, because seconds later, I heard him at the window. Not knocking, I could literally hear his breathing. Slow, heavy breaths. I stayed absolutely still. If he broke the window, I was probably done for. But thankfully he didn't break it. He just stood there for a long time. Then he walked around the cabin again, slower than before. Then nothing. I didn't sleep at all, not even for a second. Every noise the storm made, the wind hitting the walls, branches scraping the outside, sounded like footsteps. Hours passed, the fire burned low, the cold crept back in. Somewhere around dawn, the storm finally quieted. Gray light filtered through the window. I listened for any trace of movement. There was nothing. I packed my bag as fast as I could, grabbed a piece of firewood as a weapon, and unbolted the door. The world outside was completely transformed. Snow piled waist high, trees bent under the weight. The storm had covered every footprint near the cabin, except for one. A single track of boot prints led from the porch into the woods. They weren't mine, they were bigger, deeper, and they led toward the direction of the trail, which meant that man was somewhere out there between me and the way out. I didn't have a choice though, I had to leave. I walked for nearly 2 hours before I saw movement ahead of me. A ranger? Or so I thought. He wore a coat that looked official enough, waved at me and called out, "You okay?" Relief washed over me. That wasn't until he got closer. The coat wasn't a ranger's, it was a faded green military surplus jacket. His beard was long, uneven, his eyes were wide and bloodshot. And I recognized his voice the moment he opened his mouth again. "You came out," he said. It was the man from the cabin. I didn't even think, I just ran. He chased me, screaming, swearing. His boots smashing through the snow behind me, I could hear how close he was with every step. The cold was burning my lungs, and I kept stumbling. But something saved me, another voice, a real one this time. "Stop, rangers!" 3 actual park rangers appeared from behind the ridge. They had been checking the trails after the storm. The man turned and sprinted into the woods before they could catch him. He disappeared into the thick trees and all the snow. They searched for hours, they never found him. To this day I still think about that cabin. I think about the torn jacket sleeve, The blood, the footprints, the breathing at the window. And I think about how close I was to opening the door when he first shouted. If I had, I honestly don't think I'd be alive. I haven't been winter camping since, and honestly I don't think I will ever again. I was babysitting my nephew during a blizzard last year, something I might never agree to again. My sister Alyssa works at a hospital. A storm was coming in fast, and a bunch of nurses had already called out, so she asked if I could watch her son Oliver for the night. She lives a little outside of town in one of those neighborhoods that feel empty once the snow starts. By the time I got there, the wind was already bad. Alyssa was stressed and rushed through the usual instructions. Dinner's in the fridge, he goes to bed around 9, don't worry if the power flickers. She left pretty fast after that. Inside, Oliver was fine. He's 6, quiet, polite, just absorbed in his tablet. The first couple hours were normal. We ate, watched a movie, played a small board game, the usual babysitter stuff. Around 8, the storm had really started. The wind had that deep, hollow sound you get when it's hitting the house at the right angle. Nothing crazy, just enough to make you keep glancing at the windows. Around 9, the power went out. Not gradually, it just clicked off. And stayed off. I had a flashlight, and Alyssa keeps candles in a drawer, so it wasn't a big deal. Oliver stayed close to me, but didn't freak out or anything. About 15 minutes after the power went out, someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks, slow, even spaced. Not frantic like someone who needed help would knock. I looked through the peephole, and a man was standing on the porch, hood up, hands in his pockets, not moving. I didn't open the door. I didn't say anything either. I just watched him for maybe 10 seconds, waiting for him to gesture or call out. He didn't. After a few seconds, he stepped slightly out of sight, not walking away, just shifting out of the peephole angle. That was somehow worse. I told Oliver we were going upstairs because it was warmer. We brought the flashlight and went to Alyssa's bedroom. I pushed a dresser in front of the door, not because I thought he'd come in, but because it made me feel like I was doing something. It was quiet for a while, except for the wind. Then there were knocks again, this time at the back door. Same pattern, slow and deliberate. I checked the upstairs window that looks over the yard. The same guy was back there standing close to the door. It didn't even make sense with the weather the way it was. No one would be walking house to house in that storm. Before I could think of what to do, I heard a loud crack from the downstairs. The kind of sound wood makes when it's being forced. That's when I realized he wasn't trying to get our attention. He was trying to get inside. I grabbed Oliver and went into the closet. It's not a huge space, but it's deep enough that we could sit behind some boxes. I left the closet door open just a little so I could see into the room. A minute later, I heard the back door slam open, then footsteps, slow ones. He wasn't stumbling or calling out, he was just walking, checking each room. He went through the kitchen, the living room, the downstairs bathroom, then I heard him come up the stairs. He tried the master bedroom door first, the one I blocked with the dresser. He pushed on it and then hit it with his shoulder a few times. The dresser held, luckily. Then it got quiet, too quiet. I was holding my breath the whole time. Oliver was shaking but didn't make a sound. A few seconds later, I saw the shadow of someone in the room, through the crack in the closet door. Then the closet door handle moved, just a little, enough for me to know he was checking. He must have walked through in the connecting door in the bathroom. Right as he started to try the handle again, I heard sirens in the distance. They got closer fast, which made me think Alyssa probably got my 1 bar of service text and called the cops. The man ran down the stairs. I heard the back door slam again, and that was the last sound. 2 officers came inside a minute after. They didn't find him, but they did find footprints circling the house and the broken back door frame. They said guys like that pick blizzard nights because people don't see cars or footsteps as clearly, and fewer neighbors are outside. They told me we were lucky. I guess we were, but it really didn't feel like it. For a few weeks after, every time I heard someone knock, even normally, it gave me this tight feeling in my chest. That night didn't feel like a random break-in. It felt like someone was using the storm as cover to find a house where the odds were in their favor. And in all honesty, it almost worked. I've driven snowplows for almost 15 years now, and I've never feared the road the way I did that night. When you work for the county, blizzards mean overtime, mandatory overtime. You patrol back roads, mountain passes, rural neighborhoods, wherever the drifts pile up fastest. You get used to the long hours, the isolation, the endless snow, but you never really get used to the silence. That night's blizzard wasn't forecast to be anything special, a moderate winter event, they called it. The people who write those reports never drive through them though. By midnight, the visibility was down to maybe 20 feet, and the snow was falling sideways. My plow had to crawl at 10 miles per hour to keep traction. The wind kept shaking the mirrors like it wanted to rip them clean off. I was assigned to Route 19, a long rural stretch through the outskirts of town with almost no houses. It curved around a wooded area before meeting the main highway. It's the kind of road where you can drive a full hour and not see a single car. But that night, I did see one. It was around 12:30 a.m. when I spotted it, headlights. Or more accurately, the faint dim glow of headlights through the snow. The car was sitting on the shoulder, angled weirdly like it had skidded. At first, I thought it was someone who had hit a patch of black ice. I slowed the plow and angled it toward it. As I got closer, the details sharpened. The front was smashed into a tree, the airbags were deployed, the engine was off. Someone had crashed, badly, and it looked recent. I radioed it in. County dispatch, this is Unit 7 on Route 19. I've got a vehicle collision, no movement inside, requesting police and EMS. Static. A faint crackle, then silence. I tried again, nothing. Blizzard knocked out the repeater tower. I killed the plow lights except for the hazards, grabbed my heavy jacket and stepped out into the storm. Snow hit my face like sand. My boots sank almost a foot with each step. I trudged over to the car. Hello? I shouted, but the wind swallowed my voice. When I reached the driver's window, I wiped away the frost on my glove. The driver's seat was empty, but the door on the passenger side was open. Not wide, just cracked like someone had slipped out in a hurry. My stomach kind of tightened. I leaned in, shining my flashlight inside. There was a smear of blood on the deployed airbag on the center console. The glove box was open, papers scattered everywhere. There were footprints in the snow leading away from the passenger side into the trees. Not walking footprints, like running. Something about that bothered me immediately. If you survive a crash, especially in a blizzard, you go back toward the road, toward help, toward warmth. Running into the forest was the worst possible choice, unless you weren't running from the crash. I consider staying put, but protocol says to check for survivors. So I followed the footsteps. Each step felt like a mistake. The trees were completely blocking sound, and snow was muffling everything. About 40 feet in, the prints became erratic, deeper in some spots, staggered, like the person stumbled. I spotted drops of blood on the snow. Someone was hurt badly. Then I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind. A footstep, but not mine. I swung around, lifting the flashlight. Nothing. Just endless white, in the shadow of trees bending in the storm. Something wasn't right. The footsteps continued another 10 feet, then stopped. Not faded, just completely stopped. It's almost as if the person vanished. I turned in slow circles, scanning the snow. No continuation of prints, no sign of someone being dragged, no sign of a fall. There was literally nothing. My pulse kind of kicked up at this time. I felt like I was being watched. I forced myself to back away, step by step, keeping my light on the trees. That's when I heard the second sound. Not footsteps this time, breathing. I spun really fast and saw something that still makes my skin crawl. A figure stood behind the tree maybe 20 feet away, tall, still, watching me. I couldn't see a face, just a dark silhouette. I didn't shout, I didn't ask if they were okay. Something in my body told me to run, so I did. My boots slipped on the snow as I ran back toward the road. I kept the flashlight ahead of me, but the beam shook widely. Every time I turned, I expected that figure to be right behind me. I broke through the tree line and finally saw the road with the plows flashing hazards blinking through the storm. Then I saw something that turned my blood cold. My plow's driver's side door was open, wide open. Someone had climbed inside. I completely stopped, nearly falling. My first instinct was a stupid yell. "Hey, get out of my truck!" My voice vanished into the wind. The silhouette of someone shifted inside the cabin. I saw a movement, a slow turning of the head toward me. Then the interior lights snapped off, pitch black. I stood frozen for a full second too long. Then yet again I ran. Once I got in range, I saw the plow shudder slightly. Someone was climbing across the seats, toward the door, toward my direction. And I was out in the open. I sprinted around the back of the truck, ducked behind the salt hopper, and crouched low. Snow was blasting my face. Breathing was painful because how cold it was. Then I heard a sound that nearly broke me. The crunch of boots stepping out of the plow. He wasn't hurrying. He knew I had nowhere to go. I peeked under the plow's frame just enough to see boots hit the ground. Big boots. heavy. The man walked around the front of the truck, scanning the whiteout. He was tall, broad, wearing a dark coat, no hat, and no reflective gear. Not a stranded motorist, not an accident victim, someone else. Someone who had been in the woods. I held my breath so long my chest hurt. His boot stopped directly in front of the plow. He stood still. Then he crouched. His head lowered, and for the first time I saw his face, he was smiling. Not a big toothy smile, a tiny, horrible little smirk like he enjoyed knowing he scared me. He looked right at me under the plow. I scrambled backwards, instinctively slipping on the snow, but keeping low and moving toward the tailgate. The man stood up slowly, then he started walking toward the back of the truck. I had seconds. I ran. Not toward the woods, or the road, but toward a ditch. I slid down into the snow-filled ditch beside the plow. It swallowed me up to my waist. I ducked low and tucked behind the raised bank of snow, completely out of sight. I could hear boots crunching above me. He wasn't checking around the truck. He didn't see me slip into the ditch. I stayed still. Completely still. Minutes passed, or maybe even 30 seconds. I couldn't tell. Time was moving so slowly. His boots moved to the other side of the truck, then toward the woods, then silence. I didn't even want to look. When I finally raised my head above the ditch, the man was gone. I waited 2 more minutes, still nothing. My plow's door was still open. The keys amazingly were still in the ignition. I always left the truck running while clearing small segments. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I climbed out of the ditch, sprinted across the few feet of open ground, and launched myself into the driver's seat. I slammed the door, locked it, jammed the truck into gear, and floored it. My hand shook violently on the wheel. My chest felt like it was collapsing. I didn't see him again, but I swear it felt like eyes were watching me from the woods the entire drive back. When I reached the county station, I told my supervisor everything. They found the crash car the next morning. They also found blood and lots of it. But they didn't find the driver. They didn't find anyone else either. No footprints except the ones I saw. No signs of struggle beyond the crash. Just one odd detail the officers noted. Meaning whoever was sitting there likely wasn't wearing a seatbelt, or there was no one to begin with. Meaning the footprints might have belonged to a single person, the man I saw. Meaning he might have wrecked the car intentionally. He might have been waiting for the first person forced to stop on that rural road in the blizzard. Someone isolated, alone, exposed. Someone like a snowplow driver. 2 weeks later, county mechanics towed my plow in for a maintenance check. When they opened the passenger door, they found something wedged between the seat and the center console. A note, folded really neatly, with one sentence written in shaky handwriting. Next time, don't follow the prints. That's the worst part. The prints didn't end because the person collapsed or got lost. They ended because he knew I was behind him. And he stopped running so he could watch me, so he could see I'd take the bait. I don't drive Route 19 anymore. And when snow falls hard enough that the world is completely covered, I avoid the roads altogether, because now I know the truth. Blizzards don't really empty the world, they hide it. Sometimes what's hiding is absolutely terrifying.